Hey, I'm golf broadcaster Matt Adams. The updated and expanded second edition of my book, The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments, is now available. Readers can expect to march with Arnie's Army at the 1960 U.S. Open, relive Jack Nicklaus's remarkable 1986 Masters win, and be amazed by the Tiger Slam. The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments. Pick it up where fine books are sold, including BarnesandNoble.com and Amazon.com.
This is Jeremy McFarland for the Football is Family podcast. Growing up, one of the highlights of my week was when one of the big three networks, CBS, NBC, or ABC, aired an NFL Films video. I always loved the team highlights, the Super Bowl films, and especially the football follies. It was amazing to see how well these videos were put together, the amount of research that was put into each and every one of them. When you watch the NFL films, you knew you were getting the very best every time. On this episode of the Football is Family podcast, we talked to Chris Willis, head of the research library at the NFL Films and author of multiple books over the NFL. We talk about his work at the NFL Films, his books, and a little bit about what makes football family to him. If you would like to join us on a weekly basis, new episodes drop every Thursday. Please press the subscribe button on your podcast player of choice. And while you're at it, please rate and review this podcast. We have a lot of great podcasts on the Sports History Network, your home of the yesteryear of sports, and that number is growing almost daily. You can follow me at Twitter at Jeremy_McFarland or on the Football is Family Facebook page. And we're back to Football is Family, and I got a special guest. Would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Chris Willis, and for the past 25 years, I've been head of the research library at NFL Films, working with producers, finding the research for our specific projects, whether it's, TV, internet, so that's what I've been doing for the past 25 years. So it doesn't seem like that, but glad to be here and talk to you.
Well, I have a special bond to the NFL Films. One summer, I had an internship in Paducah, Kentucky, and they put me in a little hotel room or little apartment for about 3 months with no TV. And you have some downtime. So I went to Walmart and bought 2 or 3 tapes, VHS tapes of the NFL Films. And I think I watched them probably 100 times a piece. Just the slow motion and what they call the tight on the spiral pictures in the video. And, one of my favorite scenes with Jonathan Winters when he would come on. That to me made the video so great.
Yeah, you're probably talking about one of our Follies films because he was
on that. Yeah.
Jonathan Winters was a comedian. Was known for his comedic timing and stuff. So he fit in with a lot of our Follies shows from that era.
But so you deal with a lot of the research, and you're actually, if I read this correctly, you're the head of the research library since 1996. Mm-hmm. Now, what does that do? What do you do?
Yeah, so for the most part, my sort of daily chores is making sure our producers get the research they need for all our shows and documentaries. So whether it's we have actually, film and tape, which now is mainly digitized, so they'll be able to access it, from their desktops. Or we have a print material too. So we have books, magazines, programs going back, to when the NFL was founded in 1920. So whatever research needs that the producers need, they can come to the research library and find it. So, and then I also do a variety of other things, during the season or off season, whether it's, fact checking scripts, sitting on narration sessions, editing shows. I've worked on Hard Knocks the last, 5 or 6 years, our show that's on HBO that's very popular. So, but for the most part, like I said, any sort of research needs, for our producers and throughout our building, I sort of guide them to, and they'll be able to locate.
Well, I see that you won an Emmy for Hard Knocks in 16. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I started on that show, like I said, about 6 years now, I think it is, and it's a tremendous show to work on. It is very hard to work on. If you know the show, it's 5 weeks. It's every week. We shoot literally, hundreds of hours of footage every day. So and we edit it down to just a 1 60-minute show each week. So I enjoy working on it, but it is a grind for 5 or 6 weeks. As we get close to the seasons, kicking off. But it is a fun show to work on, just because it, like I said, it gives you a sort of fly on the wall sort of look at the NFL and training camp, what it makes to make the team and stuff. So it's been a pleasure, sort of an honor to work on that show.
So when you went to NFL Films in '94, you interned. When you walked into the room, did it overwhelm you with how much information they had at that point about all the NFL teams and the film and everything else that you had to do?
Well, absolutely. Like I said, I was in grad school at the time, at Ohio State. So I did my internship, in the archives department, because I thought research was my strength. But just like you mentioned, the VHS tapes that you looked at, that you were watching, well, that's what I grew up on, so, you try to find as much as you could. It's not like today where all that stuff's online. It's on YouTube. There's so much NFL stuff. There's so much NFL films, shows that you can access, but in the 80s and early 90s, it wasn't quite as prevalent, so I grew up watching those VHS tapes and the shows, whether it's, greatest quarterbacks or, Crunch Course or like I said, Jonathan Winters, the Folly Show. So seeing that from inside, like I said, yeah, you got access to all this footage, and, so you just sort of absorb it. Like I said, when I was interning, I was from out of state, so I didn't have nothing else to do, so I was there all the time, all day, like I said, I get my work done as an intern. And then, I would stay, for a couple hours just watching other stuff. So it was a joy but it was, yeah, like you mentioned, it was there's a lot to go through. There's a lot to see and stuff. And because like I said, they started in 1962 shooting film. So you're talking now over 50 years of history, and then they got library going back to the 20s and 30s. So it's like I said, it is a chore, and like I said, it can be overwhelming to figure out where things are at, where are the nuggets and the needles and haystacks and stuff like that. So
now, did you go and dig through every individual thing that they had to get the facts from it, or did you just take, I'm going to go and deal with the Jets this week or the Patriots this week, or even back in the day, the Potsdam team?
Well, it just depends. Like over the years, as I got into the job, it just depends what the project is. Because that's one thing that's great, I think, about sports and about football in general. It's like every year is different. So every year you're going to tackle something new. A perfect example is like in 2019, the NFL went through its 100th season. So we did a real deep dive in our archives to find stuff that hadn't been seen before. Like I said, we produced so much stuff, and that was going to be a historic year. But we wanted to find things that people hadn't seen or stories that hadn't been seen. So we did a lot of programming towards that. So and like I said, that changes every year, whether it's, Hard Knocks or Football Life, or Top 10, or, 30 for 30. We just did one on Al Davis, in the NFL, and Pete Rozelle. So you go and you try to find things that hasn't been seen, or, or new stuff or new footage and stuff. So that's the challenge, but that's also some of the exciting part of, especially from the research standpoint, is to find things that hadn't been seen before, or, or stories that haven't been told before. So it's different every year. It's different for each project.
Do you have a lot to do with Canton? Do you go to Canton a lot, or do you have?
Yeah, I mean, me and Canton, we sort of have a really old relationship. Like I said, I'm originally from Ohio, so I grew up in Columbus, which was 2 hours from Canton. So I grew up going to the Hall of Fame and those induction ceremonies every year. So when I started at NFL Films, I continued that. They allowed me to work it. We did. Obviously, we did some interviews there, because each year, all the old Hall of Famers come back. So we would do some interviews. So I did that for about 15 years, and then I kind of slowed down in that. We weren't doing quite as much there. the NFL Network would broadcast the ceremony. So we didn't really have to, NFL Films didn't have to shoot it all the time because they would have multiple cameras there for the ceremony. So for the last like 10 plus years, I've gone to the Hall of Fame, but for different projects, but not for the induction ceremony. So, but we do have a relationship. I know the guys that work in the archives there, the Ralph Wilson Library, and people that are on staff there, because we do some give and take of different projects. If they want something, if they need some film for something, or we need something from them. So it's been a really good relationship. But if you're a football fan, that's a spot to go to. It's one of my favorite places ever to visit. The people are great there. The staff is great there. They treat you right and stuff. So it's a tremendous place to experience.
So you get to you have to have the white gloves though, don't you?
If you're in the archives and you want to request some of the good stuff and some of the older stuff, yeah, sometimes you have to wear the white gloves to check it out.
Well, I was just looking back at some of the things that though the NFL Films do, and some of the things that you have done. And one of the things that I personally enjoy, and I will watch them, I've probably watched every episode 4 or 5 times, is the full color football, the 50th anniversary of the AFL. And I love it. I just mainly because you don't really hear a lot about the AFL. And these was it 5 or 6 episodes really make this the AFL come alive.
Absolutely. That was a fun one. I believe that was 2008, 2009 when we did the research and it aired. So it's been about 10 years. So, but that you were correct. At the time when the 50th anniversary was coming up, we wanted to do a deeper dive into it. We could have easily done an hour show or 2-hour show, but we wanted to do more. Each of those shows are an hour long, so you're talking about 4, almost 5 hours of content. So that was fun, like I said, because like I said, people didn't know that quite as much. They didn't know the stories or some of the backgrounds or some of the players and coaches. I mean, that was a 10-year history that's very important to the NFL. And if you're an AFL fan, or just a pro football fan in general, those shows were pretty fun to dig into and to learn about that time period. So that's great to hear that you enjoyed those, because like I mentioned before, that's what we try to do each year. There's certain projects and things we want to do to present the history, to promote it, and to show, hey, look, these are the stories why people love the game and could get into it and stuff like that. So those AFL shows, those full color football was a lot of fun to do.
I actually live here in Tennessee, and in a town close to where I live, they had a Kmart that was selling AFL stuff. I'm like, AFL, New York Titans. And I was like, yeah, you probably got this a little bit confused. It's not the Titans that you're thinking of. It's the Jets. But but I had to have it. It had to be done. But yeah. I actually have up on my wall here some AFL things because it had to be done. It had to be done. The Oilers and things like that. But I have here some more things. You personally, we could talk a little bit more about the NFL Films, but you personally are you're part of a Hall of Fame of something. You're a Hall of Fame of a university. What is that?
Yeah, my college that I went to in Ohio was Urbana University. It's a small Division II school in southwest Ohio, near Dayton. And so I played 4 years of football there. And was an okay receiver. Was not great. But then my accomplishments, with NFL Films and with the National Football League, also contributed to that. So in 2019, they inducted me into the Sports Hall of Fame there at Urbana University. So, which was a very unexpected and high honor for me, because I always appreciated my 4 years there, playing and going to school and just, sort of, getting on track of sort of my adult life and my future and stuff. So, right. So shout out to Urbana University.
You're an NAIA grad like I am, except my college didn't have football, so we never would have seen each other. But I wouldn't diminish your work. That's impressive to be part of this. You are an author of 6 books. Now, I was looking at some of the books, and I'm going to have to add them to my collection. I have working in the back here. But the one that I was interested in the most was Red Grange.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's your interest with Red Grange?
Yeah, that was probably, out of all the projects, that's probably, one of my favorites and most passionate, because about 20 years ago, as I was starting at NFL Films, I was always a big history buff. My dad was a used book dealer, so I grew up in the sports section reading all kinds of early football books and stuff. So that's where I get sort of my reading and writing passion from. And so reading about the early pro football, I mean, obviously Red Grange sort of being the first sort of superstar that kind of, helped launch, the sort of, media and publicity of the league, being the first real, they had Jim Thorpe, but Thorpe was sort of past his prime once the league started. So Grange was like at the height, of his sort of athletic abilities, up there with Babe Ruth and Jack Dempsey and Bobby Jones as the greatest, some of the greatest athletes, at that time. And so Grange was sort of like a real passion for me, sort of reading everything, so like 20 years ago, like I started just collecting, everything about Red Grange, so not thinking that I would write a book later. So as I got into more of the writing part and the research part of pro football and NFL history, and then I had my first couple books come out, some of the projects I wanted to do, I always thought I would do something on Red Grange. And like I mentioned a little bit earlier with the NFL's 100th season, I was like, well, that's a perfect opportunity to tell his story, to tell it in depth. If you see the book, it's like over 400 pages. So it's pretty in depth sort of look at his career and what he meant and sort of his legacy. So collecting like any type of newspaper articles, magazines, programs, photos, like I said, all those things that I gathered, over like a 20-year period, sort of paid off in the research of that. So that's where doing something on Grange was sort of the idea of it, and then the hook of the NFL's 100. He's sort of the first superstar. My publisher liked the idea, so that's sort of how everything came about to actually tell a story that became, sort of in book form.
Did you get to meet any of his family?
Well, I did. Unfortunately, he actually was married for almost 50 years with his wife, Margaret, but they had no children. Okay. And his brother, Garland, also did not have any children. So I had to go. He had two sisters. One sister passed away when she was like 20 years old. But then the second sister, Mildred, she had a few kids, so I was able to talk to that part of the family. They were spread out. There were some in New York, some in Florida, some in Illinois. So I was able to talk, correspond with them or meet them in person and stuff. So that was about as close as I was going to get to him since he didn't have any children. So and they gave a real good insight because Grange lived to be, I believe, he was 87 years old when he passed away. So there were people that, when he retired and lived down in Florida, there were people that were able to spend time with him, and he would be able to talk and tell him stories and sort of, give that insight, which was really nice for the book because, for most of his contemporaries, like people who played with him or against him, they all had passed away by then. So you had to try to find something, to tell a little bit more of that sort of side of the story and in depth. So that was good. So yes, a few family members in that direction.
Boy, what I've read about his first year, his body took a major beating. People were jealous of his money, which I guess for $100,000 that he signed for his first contract is a lot of money then and now, period. So, but I'm very impressed with the amount of, and it also, I read that you are an award winner, the Ralph Hayes Award winner for Lifetime Achievement in Pro Football Research. Now, what do? You're part of the Football the Football Researchers Association.
Yeah, there's an organization of about 400, 500 people. It's called the Pro Football Research Association, the PFRA. They have a website if you Google it, and it's a lot of just sort of diehards, that like to talk about it. There's a forum on there, and then there's there's articles on there that you can read from the last 40 years. They started in 1978. Bob Carroll, who's a well-known NFL historian, who started the organization at the Hall of Fame with Joe Horgan, who was executive director at the Hall of Fame was a vice president there at the Hall of Fame for 40 years. So they started it, back in the late 70s, and it's a really good organization, just like, football history, so they honored me with that a couple years ago. I've been a member since I was in grad school, like in 93, 94. And have contributed some articles there. So it's a really nice organization to be a part of.
Now you're from Columbus, Ohio. You went to the University of Ohio, the Ohio State University, I should say, right?
For grad school for 1 year, yes.
For grad school. Now, are you more of a college fan or a pro fan?
Well, most people would say I'm stuck in the middle. I'll watch any football game anytime. So obviously, when I was growing up in Columbus, I was 10 minutes away from High State's campus. So going to High State games is like nothing. It's like the top thing to do. So I'm a big college football fan, so I plan my Saturdays around High State football and watching college football. And then I love the NFL. So, it's tough for me to choose, one or the other. Like being on the East Coast, it's very odd because the East Coast is not, doesn't have a huge college football following. It's all pro sports here on the East Coast and some college basketball, so you got Rutgers and you got Boston College, and that's about it, so
you're close to the Giants and the Jets, aren't you?
Yeah. So it's huge on the pro sports in the NFL side. But so when I play my Saturdays, I'm like, I'm going to watch the High State. I'm going to watch the SEC football. I'm going to watch some Big Ten games. So I miss that, not living in the Midwest, a little bit, but it's tough. Like I said, but I'll watch both sports. I really love watching college football, and I really love, obviously I love, the NFL and stuff. So,
were you excited when Rutgers became a member of the Big Ten?
Well, I get the point why, Rutgers and Maryland, the Big Ten wanted a little more East Coast appeal, obviously, they've struggled for the most part, so, Graciano, for a couple of years, there, but it's tough because they don't have, same thing with Maryland. They don't have the rivalries. They don't have the history and the passion as some of the Big Ten schools, so, I'll watch them, I've been to Maryland, to watch a High State play Maryland at Maryland. I haven't been to a Rutgers game quite yet up at, Rutgers, but it's totally different. You're not going to get 90,000, 100. I've been to Penn State, Ohio State. I've been to, obviously Ohio State games. It's a totally different atmosphere. Like, the Maryland game, there was barely like 40,000, it's a nice stadium, Under Armour's put some money in it. So, but it's totally different. It's a totally different atmosphere. So it's going to take a while, I think, for Rutgers and Maryland to sort of build that somewhat like a brand, and also the competitiveness to where it feels like you're watching Big Ten, and they're going to be really competitive each year and stuff. So, so that's the only thing that's kind of missed, because all the other schools, like even Nebraska, but all the other schools, it's Big Ten football, it's exciting, the fans are into it and stuff like that. So, so it just might take Rutgers, a little bit longer to get to that level.
What I'm envious about you is that you got to see Eddie George play in college. You got to see him play in college, and down here in Tennessee, we didn't get to see him until they basically said Houston's coming to Tennessee, and I got to see some of the film. But you've seen in your time watching Ohio State, you've seen some impressive players. Who's your favorite player that you've seen?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think there's three that come to mind right off the bat. Two on the offensive side of the football is, like you said, Eddie George, and then Keith Byers before that. Byers to me was, maybe just because I was just getting into the game, and he was tremendous. If it wasn't for one Doug Flutie Hail Mary against Miami, I think he wins the Heisman that year. He was so great that year. He ran for like 1,800 yards, and he was like the best running back in college football. And then Eddie George was just tremendous, thrill to watch. That year, and they were so good that year. They almost went undefeated. But Eddie George was tremendous. And then on the defensive side, Chris Spielman was by far the best defensive player. As great as like Joey Bosa and Chase Young and some of these recent guys. Chris Billman was like pretty much on every tackle, at Ohio State, from the linebacker position. So he was really fun to watch. He was a Massillon boy, he was an Ohio boy, and just was tremendous college linebacker. And like I said, really good NFL player. But at Ohio State, he was just like, he seemed to be in on every game. He'd have like 20 tackles, and just like, they just can't block him.
Well, you heard the story how he picked Ohio State. He asked his dad, should I go to Michigan or Ohio State? And he said, you're going to Ohio State or you're not my son anymore, pretty much.
Yeah.
And he said, well, there you go. That's how I picked it. Just looking back, and you've been there 25 years, the NFL Films, you've written 6 books, you've won several awards, you've talked to people. If you were to take one thing and just say, this is the highlight of my career so far, and I'm not talking about your life is different. Your career is right now. Just, your internship, things that led up to where you are right now. What is that one highlight?
Well, I think, first would be the books. Like, the books are all different projects. And like I said, that's going to be my sort of legacy. Those books will live on forever, hopefully in book form, and then on they'll be online or whatever, the future generation. So I love those projects, because they're each different one. But for me, I think in my career, the one thing right now that I remember, or will remember the best, is when the NFL was turned 100 years old. I was invited to be on the Blue Ribbon panel to vote for the NFL's NFL 100 all-time team. I think there was like 25 of us on that Blue Ribbon panel. That include John Madden and Bill Belichick, Bill Poley and Ron Wolf, so to be invited and to be a part of that, process, to vote on that all-time team, that's about as good as it gets for a historian like myself, to sort of hear them talk about players, to be a part of that, for them to respect my, sort of opinion and stuff like that. So that was probably the height of at least my career up to this point, was being a part of that Blue Ribbon panel.
I'll tell you what, that if anybody remembers anything about the 100th year, it's that commercial where they're fighting over the cake. The NFL commercial. No, listening to the 100th year, and I have Joe Horrigan's book here, and I can't remember where I put it, but his book about the NFL 100, I believe he wrote that one, or he wrote something to that effect. Just hearing the stories about the NFL 100, it makes me realize that even though you may know a lot, you don't know enough. There's so much more to learn. And I appreciate your effort and your time to put into making NFL come alive. Now, before I let you go, Mr. Chris, do me a couple of favors, will you? How can people get a hold of you if they want to follow you on Twitter?
It's CD Willis 83. So CDWILIS 80. The number 83 is the handle.
And if they want to buy your books, where can they get them?
You can get them on Amazon. Or if you want to go to the publisher's website, the publisher's Rowan and Littlefield. So it's a Rowan, ROWMAN.com. So, but they're on Amazon and they're at Rowan.com, so if you want to go through the publisher's website. So I appreciate that.
No, hey, we'll get this out and we'll put a link onto to my Facebook page and everything else so we can get your books out. I appreciate your time.
No, it's just great. Like I said, I've always liked talking about different subjects. And like I said, these are certain things that I don't get to talk about quite as much. Some of these podcasts are great. So thanks for having me, Jeremy. I appreciate it. It's been awesome.
And this is why football is family to Chris Willis. Thank you.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history. But as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.